Getting back into DuckTales reviews after my hiatus, we're talking about the last crafts of the Sunchaser today, which is a very interesting episode. I've talked about it before on the channel, at least I'm pretty sure I have. The concept of a bottle episode or a bottle show, which is an episode of a show done on a budget in order to either recoup costs from a larger project earlier in the season or to hold money back for a bigger project coming later in the production. It'll make use of only existing sets and maybe minor redressings of them, and probably only 1 or 2 sets total. So like on Star Trek, which was where I mostly saw them back in the old TNG era Star Treks, you would have episodes that only take place on the Enterprise. There's no going to a planet, there's no even talking to somebody on a planet unless the set that they're standing in can be done using the same ones you're already using with just some minor changes. Like maybe you'd have the engine room set, the bridge, maybe like the lounge or 10 forward, and like one of the hallways or something. And that's it. Just stuff that would already be there and already be connected together for the most part on the stage that you're using. Or for an example, in Deep Space Nine, there's a couple times where they send crews to a different space station, but it's the same design as the space station that the show is set on, so they just have to redress the sets a little bit to make it look like a new place. And I've always had a lot of respect for bottle shows because it allows the writers the perfect excuse to get really creative with the presentation of not just the characters, because you're kind of forcing everybody into one place for the whole time, changing the way their dynamic is usually handled on the show, but the environment as well. How can you use the environment to help tell the story? And I don't know enough about animation to know if there's like a benefit to setting everything in one location in an animated show like there is in something like The Next Generation. But this is a bottle show. This episode is a bottle show, with a couple of exceptions setting up the episode, and aside from the fact there's like an exterior, they're like in a mountainous exterior that like wouldn't be consistent with how a bottle show works in a live action show. This is a bottle show. It all takes place on the Sunchaser. The whole ass family is on there, and with the exception of Donald, who is fixing up his boat still, including Beakley and Webby. Ducksworth isn't there though, but he's a ghost, so I guess he couldn't go. But he leaves at the end of the episode, so maybe he could have. It's beside the point. Almost the whole family is there, and we get to see them interacting with each other and clashing with each other in ways that they usually don't. Like Beakley giving Launchpad shit for the fact that he's just absolutely terrible at everything he does was really funny. Like I've reached the point where I can suspend my disbelief and just accept that it's an established part of this world that crashing their plane over and over again, as long as it's done in a comedic way instead of like an actual serious way, they're all going to be fine. So like I don't give him as much shit as I used to, but like it's a little hard to separate those things when this episode is literally about them maybe crashing the plane and dying. Point is, they made some good use of it. There were some good jokes in here, and Launchpad actually does good here sometimes. Like, he probably should have spoke up a little more than he actually did when things started to go to crap, but like his awareness of the situation was really complete and complex. He really got the danger of what was going on and took action when he could to try to mitigate it. He also seemed very emotionally aware of what was going on as the conflict started, and like he wished he could do something to help, even though he really wasn't in the position to do so. I thought that was cool. There was a lot of face acting from the animated character Launchpad in the background of this episode that I really appreciated. Primarily, though, this is the penultimate episode of the season. It's setting up for what's to come, and not so much plot-wise, but like situation-wise. There is the looming threat of Magica sitting over this entire season, right? And yeah, she's dangerous, and yeah, we saw from that dreamscape bit in what was it, the other band of Scrooge McDuck, I think was the name of the episode, that at the very least, Lena thinks that Magica would just straight up murder children without hesitation. Whether or not she actually would, we can't be 100% sure, but it seems like if the person she's literally tethered to thinks that, we should give it heed. And yet, despite that, even though she seems dangerous, it's hard to really see this one person as a genuine threat to this entire family. So I really appreciate that this episode, they are trying their best to break the family up. Now, I have watched the entire series at this point. It's been a while now. I haven't rewatched it for a while, but I don't remember how the season 1 finale really goes. I had kind of blended this in with it and thought that a lot of the stuff that happened here was part of it. So rewatching this episode for the review, I realized I don't actually remember much of what happens. It's going to be very interesting to go back and revisit that, but I do remember at the very least, as I was being reminded of the events of this episode, I was like, oh yeah, this is the one where I'm like, oh, if they're going to have to deal with Magica in the next one, how's that going to go? Because they all kind of hate each other right now. The main conceit of this episode is that they crash, but they don't actually crash. They've got the belly of the plane stuck on the top of a very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Sharp peak. God. And they're teetering. And if they put too much weight in one area or another, the plane will fall, and they don't have an engine. They need to restart the engine, and they might not, therefore, be able to recover in time to actually save the passengers when the plane maybe crashes at the bottom. And rather than just evacuate the plane, Scrooge, who's been trying to save face and prove himself as still a competent adventurer to Beakley, who's been criticizing the way he handles these missions, i.e. using Launchpad for anything. I mean, he's stubbornly trying to keep the plane from falling and get the engine restarted so they can keep going on their way. And meanwhile, the kids are still trying to solve the Della mystery. They have all the pieces they need, they believe, to put everything together, and are trying to do so in secret on the plane. And the conflict comes from the fact that one of the literal pieces that they need is fluttering about the plane as they're trying to watch the weight distribution of the plane. And so, as Scrooge is arguing with Beakley and Launchpad is just trying to kind of play the middleman as best he can, the kids are trying to get the missing piece without the plane moving enough that anybody will realize what they're doing, because they don't want Scrooge to interfere in them solving the mystery. It's simple but effective, and it builds so well off of all of the plot-related stuff that came in episodes earlier in the season. I love this a lot. It's just such a good setup for an episode. I also love the meta call-out. Scrooge is going on this. It's an adventure vacation thing like he does with everybody, but he's going specifically this time to literally chase a MacGuffin. A MacGuffin being the name for anything that has no use or purpose except to drive the plot forward. Like, literally, Scrooge, at least seemingly, it turns out to be more complicated than that, seemingly is so interested in keeping this trip going instead of just bailing when things get super dangerous, because he's after this literal MacGuffin. It was cute. It was a cute reference. But things are more complicated than that. As things go on, you realize that Scrooge being called out by Beakley the way he was reminded him of how he failed to protect Della. And now he is trying to save the mission to prove that he did the right thing back when he was trying to save her, which we'll get to in a minute. But really, at the end of the day, all of these problems would have been solved if everybody had just talked to each other. If they hadn't kept it so secret from the kids what happened to their mom, if the kids had just taken what they had to Scrooge and said, hey, this is really bothering us, we want to know what happens, can you just please tell us? If Scrooge had been more open with Beakley about how their adventures work, and taken her on one before this and shown her how they handle the everyday crises that they face, everything just would have been so much smoother and so much better. You wouldn't have had this abrupt reveal of what actually happened to Della in the midst of a life or death situation where everybody's pumped full of adrenaline and at the edge of their wits, and I think things would have just gone a lot better. Because we do, of course, find out what happened to Della in this episode. She and Donald and Scrooge used to adventure together. We knew that. But they had gone pretty much everywhere of interest on Earth, which is weird because they're still finding places of interest to go now. So I don't really know how that works. But I can imagine if you're an adventurer who has the funds to go anywhere, and you suddenly run out of places to go, I can understand how devastating that might be. But they had gone basically everywhere, and the kids were being hatched. They were in their eggs. They were coming soon. And so Scrooge wanted to give Della something special, that being a way of exploring the stars, and one day taking her kids to see them. So he built her a rocket. That's the Spirit Celine, and kept it secret from her, which was the first choice he made that I think he regrets, because she sniffed out the secret, didn't realize what specifically it was for, and decided to take it for a spin before he did whatever he was going to do with it. Ended up caught in a storm, and rather than just helping her guide herself back down to Earth, Scrooge decided that she had a better chance if he guided her through the storm, and that ended up being a mistake, and she was lost. And he explains that to the kids. He tries to. He doesn't do a very good job of explaining the nuance of it. He just relays the facts, and they assume that he made the wrong choice when the better choice was obvious, and that he should have been able to predict that something bad would happen if he kept the secret, and that he must not have tried very hard to find her. He must have given up the moment it started to cost him any of his money. And rather than just explain, he gets all defensive, because of course he does. He's been dealing with the guilt of this for so long, and they're coming at him harder than they would have if they hadn't been in such a serious situation as the background to this entire interaction, right? And so he gets all defensive and pisses them off. Ends up yelling at Beakley and excluding Webby from the family, which is stupid because that's not something he would normally do. And Launchpad ends up saving them by actually recovering the plane when it falls. Like, really, dude should have spoken up more throughout the episode, but he was kind of the MVP here. He was trying to keep the kids together, he was trying to keep the adults together. He ended up saving the day. I need to stop giving him so much shit, frankly. But it just, my point is, it wasn't handled as well as it could have been. He, like, pulls rank on Beakley, like, I'm your boss, do what I say. It was rough to watch. And then at the end, as the boys go back to Donald and say, let's leave, and Beakley goes to take her vacation days and leave with Webby, and it's just, it's heartbreaking to see. He is so stubborn, and so he's having so much trouble actually confronting and saying out loud the things that he feels guilt for, that he tries to convince himself that he's happy with the outcome, even though we see in a very devastating flashback montage that he really was just trying to do his best, and he really was just trying to do something good for Della, and he spent so much money trying to find her. So much that his board stopped him, and this may even be one of the reasons why they seem so villainously critical of him now. Because they're still not sure he isn't going to start spending to the degree that he did before. And, like, frankly, I don't think they should have stopped him. I think they should have let him spend any of the money he wanted to try to save a life. But I can understand their perspective, at the very least, like, intellectually, right? And that's where we're left. The family has broken up into separate groups. Scrooge is left alone, crying in his chair while declaring that he is, of course, happy with the way things turned out because he's unable to face the truth of his own feelings. It's rough. It's good. It's excellent emotional payoff for everything that's happened so far regarding this plotline. And it really all does come down to communication and how communication around this subject was handled. Secrecy was applied where it didn't need to be. And Scrooge should have said, hey, but let's wait to talk about this until after we're not about to die anymore, right? It could have been so much better. And yet, looking at the kids throughout this, their communication's been great. It's only the adults that really seem to have a problem. Beakley and Scrooge don't communicate well here. Launchpad doesn't seem to be able to speak up when he wants to here. Scrooge isn't even honest with himself, so of course the communication with others is going to be rubbish. But the kids, they're communicating great. They're making plans, they're solving problems, they're scheming out things, creating strategies. We have one scene where Webby is directing two of them to move in sequence in opposite directions to keep the balance of the plane so that they don't fall as they're trying to recover the missing piece. It's just so interesting to see these kids, this new generation, doing such a better job and handling this so much better than the people who came before them. And while Scrooge kind of comes off as he's probably as much the antagonist of this as anybody can be considered, right? This episode, like, he doesn't handle himself, he doesn't carry himself well. But as much as that's true, I understand where he's coming from. I understand why he feels and reacts the way he does. It's just really good. It's a really good episode. One of my favorites, actually, the more I think about it. At least the ones that I can remember well, which I assume are the ones that I like better, right? At least so far. There's probably episodes I like better. We'll see as I continue to go back through the series, which I'm going to be doing. I don't know how often yet. I'm hoping this video will go up on Sunday, but the way things are looking, it might not be until Monday, unfortunately, which is annoying. I don't know how often I'll be doing DuckTales yet. I want to do something Steven Universe next week. And at some point, I do plan to crank out more than one of these a week. Eventually, more than one video a week. So, like, pace will pick up then. But we have the season finale next, and then we have season 2, which, again, I've watched the whole thing. I might be getting some of the episodes mixed up, but I don't remember season 2 as well as I remember season 1. I've also talked about season 1, like, to you guys, so that might be part of the reason. I remember the series finale, though. I thought that was pretty good. Point is, we'll get there. We're getting there. It's happening. In the meantime, though, what did you think of this episode? If you've seen it, let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well subscribe and, check for links in the description, all that stuff. Either way, though, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.